The sun was dying red over the jagged canyon. A thunderclap boomed in the distance, rolling across the desert like an omen. Hoofbeats hammered the cracked earth, each drumming beat louder than the last. Isabella's heart slammed in her chest as she clung to the saddle, her bridal gown tattered and dust-stained. The acrid smell of gunpowder stung her nose as a rifle shot cracked past her ear. She didn't dare look back. Behind them, 4 riders in black were gaining ground, silhouettes in swirling dust. Ahead, jagged rocks and scattered mesquite bushes marked the border of Apache lands, a place even devils feared to tread at dusk. Samuel, Gray Wolf, Colton urged his horse onward, jaw set. Colton had only 2 bullets left in his revolver and no time to reload. Another shot whizzed by, and he fired back. A distant cry told him his aim was true, but it only bought a fleeting pause. Just then, from the ridge ahead, came the eerie howl of a war horn. Colton's blood ran cold. A line of dark figures appeared on the ridge, adorned with feathers and war paint. Apache warriors. They were riding straight into an ambush. He pulled the reins hard. The mare reared, nostrils flaring with fear. Isabella gasped, nearly losing her grip. Trapped. Gunmen closing in from behind, Apaches blocking the escape. The wind carried the faint smell of rain on hot sand. Nightfall and a brewing storm approached fast. Time was running out. Colton's eyes darted for any path out. There was none. They were caught between bullets and blades, the clock ticking toward disaster. But 12 hours earlier. Late morning light filtered through stained glass windows as Isabella stood trembling at the altar, enjoying the ride. Hit subscribe now for more gripping Western adventures. The small desert chapel smelled of incense and old wood, meant to calm her nerves. But all she could hear was the pounding of her own blood in her ears and the distant toll of a church bell announcing noon. In the pews behind her veil, a dozen guests murmured, their whispers a rustling chorus like dry leaves. The air was stifling, heavy with perfume and sweat. Beside her, Clayton Kane, her husband-to-be and the most feared rancher south of the border, gripped her arm with possessive force. Kane's cologne couldn't mask the scent of whiskey on his breath. He smiled for the crowd, but growled under his breath, "Try anything and you'll regret it." His fingers bit into her satin sleeve. Isabella's stomach churned with dread. She knew his cruelty too well. Marrying him meant a lifetime in a gilded cage. As the preacher cleared his throat to begin the vows, a boom of thunder rattled the distant sky. Kane's icy eyes flickered warily. Apache weather, folks would say, a bad omen. Isabella's heart thundered with it. This was her only chance. In a flash of resolve, she yanked free from Kane's grasp. She hurled her bouquet into his chest and bolted down the aisle. Gasps rose behind her. "Isabella!" Kane's roar chased her as she kicked open the side door of the chapel and sprinted into the dusty street. Outside, horses tied for the wedding feast reared at the sudden commotion. Isabella seized the nearest mare, the leather reins slick in her sweaty hands. A sharp gunshot cracked from the chapel steps, Kane firing a warning into the sky. He wouldn't risk killing her. The acrid tang of gun smoke mixed with the scent of the spooked horse. Isabella swung onto the saddle, her pulse pounding like a war drum in her ears. She dug her heels in and the mare bolted forward. Behind her, Kane's men were already scrambling to mount up amid shouted orders. She had perhaps a minute's head start, no more. Heart in her throat, Isabella galloped out of town, fleeing the only life she'd ever known. The sun climbed toward its zenith, and with every thundering stride she put more miles and more danger behind her. Would it be enough to outrun Kane's wrath? She could hear his furious oath on the wind, and the ticking clock of hooves echoed in her mind. The chase was on, and noon's high shadows offered nowhere to hide. Isabella and Colton rode hard into the open desert, leaving the town and its fury behind. In the early afternoon heat, mirages blurred the sagebrush and red earth mesas ahead. The only sounds were the rhythmic thud of hoofbeats and Isabella's ragged breathing as she fought to keep fear at bay. A bead of sweat traced down her temple. She caught the faint smell of sage and dry cedar on the hot breeze, earthy and reassuring. Colton led them off the main trail, cutting through a shallow arroyo where the sand was softer. "They'll follow our tracks," he muttered, mostly to himself. Isabella's mare whinnied, skittish from the heat and the unfamiliar rider. Colton slowed his pace. He saw the terror still etched on Isabella's face. "There's a stream ahead. We'll water the horses, then keep moving," he said gruffly. His voice was low and calm, a stark contrast to the chaos she'd left behind. She nodded. They paused at a muddy, half-dry creek to let the horses drink. Isabella nearly collapsed as she dismounted, and Colton caught her elbow to steady her. The water was warm and brackish, but a few sips revived them. For a long moment, neither spoke over the quiet trickle of the stream. "Why are you helping me?" she asked softly, voice barely above a whisper. Colton tensed. He glanced at the horizon, where distant thunderheads were gathering again. "I know what it's like to run," he finally said, cryptic and distant. He rinsed a bandana and handed it to her. Isabella wiped the dust from her face and caught a hint of his scent on the cloth. Gun oil, leather, a trace of tobacco. A sudden gunshot echoed far down the arroyo, snapping them both to attention. Colton's eyes narrowed. The posse was still on their trail, and the clock was ticking faster now. Without another word, he swung back into his saddle and signaled for her to mount up. They had to move. As they set off again, the wind picked up, carrying the distant rumble of thunder and a faint hint of rain. Isabella cast one last look at the fading creek behind them. How long before Kane's men, or Apache scouts, caught their scent in these hills? Nightfall was still hours away, but already an uneasy darkness loomed on the horizon, urging them onward. They pressed on as afternoon faded into golden dusk. Clouds gathered purple in the east, grumbling in the distance. Colton guided them up a narrow defile into the hills along what once was a Spanish mission trail. The rocky path echoed with the clink of bridles and the distant cry of a hawk. Isabella's thighs ached, but fear kept her upright. Every so often, Colton paused to scan the back trail or sniff the smoky scent of impending rain on the wind. Both of them knew they were being hunted, by Kane's men, or perhaps Apache eyes in the rocks. When they crested a ridge, the ruins of an old adobe mission lay ahead, half swallowed by sagebrush and thyme. Colton signaled to dismount. "We'll shelter here till nightfall," he said. Isabella swallowed, helping hobble the horses in an overgrown alcove. The place smelled of ashes and desert sage. As they entered the crumbling chapel, a shotgun's metallic click echoed. "That you, Gray Wolf?" called a gravelly voice from the shadows. From behind a toppled altar, an elderly man with a long gray beard and weary eyes rose. Colton lowered his revolver and managed a tight smile. "Easy, Padre. It's me." The old mission priest, Colton's former mentor, Father Alonzo, stepped forward into the last orange light of dusk. He glanced at Isabella in surprise. Alonzo hurried them inside, barring the warped wooden door. "You've got the devil on your heels, boy. A half-dozen riders passed not an hour ago," he whispered. Isabella's breath caught. Kane's men were close. Colton's jaw set like stone. The priest laid a trembling hand on Colton's shoulder. "I hope you know what you're doing, Samuel." Colton nodded, but his haunted gaze fell to an old rosary hanging on the wall. It reminded him of a promise made at a grave long ago. He wouldn't fail someone again. Before Isabella could ask what he meant, a gunshot boomed outside, then another. Through a narrow window slit, Colton saw muzzle flashes in the darkening gloom. They'd been found. Wood splinters flew as bullets thudded into the door. Isabella stifled a scream as glass exploded from a dusty pane behind her. "Get down!" Colton barked, drawing his revolver. Father Alonso pulled a rusty pistol from under his robe. Thunder crashed overhead as if the heavens themselves had opened fire. Trapped inside, they had seconds to act, or be riddled where they stood. Bullets whistled through the rain-scented night air, punching holes in the plaster walls. Colton returned fire through the splintered door, each shot a thunderclap in the cramped mission. A scream outside told him his aim was true, but there were too many muzzles flashing out there. Father Alonso grunted as a bullet grazed his shoulder, and Isabella bit back a cry, pressing a kerchief to the old man's wound. Gunpowder smoke and the smell of wet earth filled the room as rain blew in. "Kane!" Colton bellowed between volleys. "You want the girl. Come in and get her." Lightning flashed, illuminating the hulking figure of Clayton Kane just beyond the threshold. "Fine by me," Kane snarled. "Flush them out." At his signal, a flaming bottle crashed through a window, shattering against a pew and spreading hungry flames. The dry wooden beams caught in seconds. Heat licked at Isabella's face. Smoke churned toward the rafters. They'd burn or be gunned down if they stayed. Father Alonso coughed, slumping against the wall. The fire cast flickering red shadows across his ashen face. Isabella grabbed Colton's arm, eyes wide with panic. They were running out of time and air. "Surrender or roast alive!" Kane shouted, laughter in his voice. The crackle of flames grew louder than the gunshots outside. Colton looked to the priest and the girl, his conscience and his heart. He made his choice. Colton squeezed Isabella's hand. "Follow me. Trust me," he whispered. He reached into his satchel and drew out a last desperate tool, a stick of dynamite from his outlaw days. Could this save them or seal their fate? The fuse sizzled in the hellish glow, seconds ticking down to an explosion that would decide everything. The dynamite erupted with a deafening boom, blowing the door off its hinges in a fireball of splinters and dust. Kane's men were flung back by the blast, their screams swallowed by thunder. In the chaos, Colton grabbed Isabella's wrist and pulled her through the billowing smoke into the stormy night amid the acrid stench of black powder. Outside, rain poured from a ruptured sky. Two of Kane's henchmen stumbled about, dazed in the mud. Colton wasted no time. A swift uppercut sent one sprawling, while Isabella, fueled by adrenaline, swung a broken timber into the second man's gut. He collapsed. Clayton Kane himself emerged through the curtain of rain, eyes wild with fury beneath his dripping hat. He leveled his revolver at Colton's chest, his hand rock steady even as lightning veined the sky. A gunshot cracked. Colton flinched, but it was Kane who roared, his revolver flying from his grasp as the shot shattered his gun hand. In the mission doorway, Father Alonso knelt in silhouette, his rusted pistol smoking. The old mentor's last bullet struck true. Kane cursed and clutched his ruined hand, and Alonso slumped from sight, spent. The old man had given Colton one final chance. With a feral shout, Colton sprang forward, tackling Kane to the muddy ground. Thunder boomed as the two men rolled through the mud, trading savage blows. Kane fought like a cornered wolf, landing a punch to Colton's ribs that knocked the wind from him. Isabella watched in horror, rain-soaked and trembling. She wanted to help, but this fight had to run its course. Mustering his last strength, Colton slammed an elbow into Kane's jaw. The brute reeled. Colton seized Kane's collar and drove a fist into his gut. Kane crumpled to his knees. Colton snatched up Kane's fallen revolver and cocked the hammer, chest heaving as he aimed at the man who would have destroyed Isabella's life. Kane knelt in the downpour, rain mixing with the blood streaking his swollen face. Defiant to the end, he sneered through broken teeth. "Go on, outlaw. Do it." Colton's finger tightened on the trigger. Each heartbeat thudded like a ticking clock in his ears. Would he become the cold-blooded killer he'd sworn never to be? Colton's heart pounded. He grit his teeth and slowly lowered the gun. He would not execute an unarmed man. Mercy glinted in his eyes. Suddenly, Kane lunged with a crazed roar, a gleaming knife clenched in his good hand. Before Colton could react, a single gunshot rang out, sharp as a bolt of lightning. Kane froze, the knife inches from Colton's heart. A red stain spread across the front of the rancher's fine coat. Clayton Kane toppled back into the mud, the life dimming in his eyes as rain fell upon his motionless form. Isabella stood a few paces behind, Colton's Colt revolver smoking in her grip, rain and tears streaming down her face. In the final second, she had saved Colton from certain death. The remaining henchmen, seeing their boss fall, melted into the darkness, chased off by the wrath of the storm. Colton staggered to his feet, hardly believing it was over. He pulled Isabella into his arms, both of them shaking with exhaustion as the rain washed the blood and soot from their skin. Father Alonso limped out into the mud, alive but wounded, and gave a weary nod. They had survived. The air reeked of gunpowder and charred wood in the lull. It was over, or so they thought. A slow, sarcastic clap echoed from the shadows beyond the shattered walls. Colton spun, pushing Isabella behind him. From behind a charred mesquite trunk, a lone figure emerged, rifle in hand. Lightning revealed a gaunt, scarred face twisted in a cruel grin. It was Jeb Black Jack Carver, once his closest friend, long presumed dead. "Well, that was one hell of a show, Sam," Carver drawled, cocking his rifle with a menacing click. "But you and me, we've got unfinished business." Colton's stomach dropped as Jeb leveled the barrel at them. A second wave of vengeance had arrived, and the clock on their lives began ticking down once more. Rain dripped from the charred eaves as dawn's first light crept through the fading storm clouds. Jeb Carver circled slowly, rifle trained on Colton's chest. Isabella saw hatred etched on Jeb's face each time the sky flickered with lightning. "I crawled out of that canyon alive, Sam," he spat. "While you ran free, I spent 5 years in hell." Colton raised his empty hands, aching from the fight. The petrichor of wet earth mixed with the bitter tang of gunsmoke. "Jeb, I thought you were dead. I tried to find you," he said hoarsely. "Lies," Jeb snarled, thumb pulling back the rifle's hammer. "You left me to die. You became a hero, and I became a ghost." Isabella's pulse raced. Inside the ruins, an old clock ticked softly, each second slipping away. Colton stepped forward, placing himself squarely between Jeb and Isabella. "I'm sorry," he pleaded over the patter of rain. "Not a day passed I didn't regret what happened." A distant rumble of thunder underscored his words. Jeb's eyes blazed with grief and malice. Sorry won't bring back my brother, or those lost years. His finger tightened on the trigger. In a blink, he swung the rifle toward Isabella. You don't deserve happiness, so you don't deserve her. Isabella's breath caught as the barrel moved toward her. Instinct took hold. Colton dove for Father Alonso's fallen pistol in the mud and squeezed the trigger. A single shot cracked the dawn. Jeb staggered, a crimson bloom spreading on his duster. His rifle slipped from his fingers as he fell to his knees. Colton rose, a smoking pistol clutched in his hand. He had fired in the blink of an eye to save the woman he loved. Jeb coughed weakly, collapsing against Colton as the outlaw rushed forward to catch him. Rain mingled with the tears on Colton's face. The dying man gave a faint, bitter smile. "Guess you kept your promise after all," he whispered. His eyes went vacant as the last breath left him. Colton held Jeb until he felt the final heartbeat stop. Isabella knelt beside them, laying a gentle hand on Colton's shoulder. At long last, dawn broke fully over the ruined mission. Golden light spilled across 2 weary survivors and the wreckage left behind. Colton gently closed Jeb's eyes and rose shakily to his feet. Without a word, he took Isabella's hand. Side by side, they walked away from the ruins, stepping into whatever uncertain morning lay ahead. Enjoyed the tale. Subscribe for more stories of grit and heart on the wild frontier. He gave up killing to save his soul, only to kill to save hers.